Hey there! Today we're diving into the Second Sino-Japanese War, a major conflict that took place from 1937 to 1945. It started when China decided to stand up against Japan's expansion in their homeland. The spark? Japan's move into Manchuria, which really got the ball rolling.
Absolutely, and Japan wasn't holding back at all. They made some fast moves early in the war. One of the most shocking events was the Nanjing Massacre, a time of great horror. Both leaders like Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong played key roles. Oh, and let's not forget the intriguing moments that came out of this massive struggle.
In the early 20th century, Japan started to control Manchuria. They had some demands and made deals. Then, in 1931, something big happened. It was called the Mukden Incident. Japan said that part of the railway was blown up by Chinese people. Using this, Japan took the city and started what we now call Manchukuo.
Yes, that incident caused a lot of tension between China and Japan. People in China were not happy. Japan had power, but China was worried and angry. They saw this Manchukuo as a puppet state where Japan controlled everything. The Chinese needed to act, but it was hard. Japan had created a pretend government to show they were in charge.
Talking about that time, do you recall Zhang Zuolin? He was a strong leader in Manchuria. But in a twist, Japanese officers killed him in 1928. His son, Zhang Suiliang, changed sides soon after. He decided to work with the nationalists, trying to free China from foreign rule. This caused some problems, and small fights started to happen.
Yes, and let's not forget when the Japanese took Mukden. The city had a big strategic importance. It showed that Japan was serious and ready for bigger moves. This moment was like a warning, a sign that a full-scale war was not far. The Mukden incident was just the start of what was going to be a difficult time.
The Marco Polo Bridge incident in 1937 is what really got the ball rolling. This skirmish between Chinese and Japanese troops near Beijing turned quickly into a full-scale war. Japan had been preparing for this moment, and they moved fast, capturing key cities like Beiping and Tientsin. It was a fast and frightening time for China, facing this rapid Japanese expansion.
Yes, Japan didn't stop there. Soon they had their sights set on Shanghai, a major city. The battle there was intense, but unfortunately Japan took control. After Shanghai, the horror of the Nanjing Massacre unfolded. Thousands were killed and many more faced unspeakable hardships. Chiang Kai-shek, leading the nationalists, had to move the capital further west to Hankow for safety.
Japan's military might seem overwhelming at the time, with superior power both on land and sea. Their air force dominated the skies too, allowing them to bomb Chinese cities without much opposition. As they took control of cities and important railways, their grip on China tightened. I can't even begin to imagine the fear people felt seeing their homes and cities fall under occupation.
It was indeed a tough and scary time. However, the Chinese didn't give up. There was strong resistance across the country. People came together, and this unity was pivotal in their fight back. The formation of the United Front, bringing together different Chinese factions like the nationalists and communists, was a significant step. It showed that the struggle against Japan was a concern for all of China, no matter their previous differences.
The commitment to resist Japan was felt across the nation. Everyone knew the stakes and the importance of pushing back against the occupation. Despite Japan's initial successes and powerful forces, the spirit and determination of the Chinese people kept the fight going. This period of initial clashes and expansion really set the stage for a long and difficult conflict ahead, but also instilled a sense of unity and persistence in Chinese society.
Absolutely. The passion and pride of the people, despite being up against such formidable odds, was incredible. This fight was about defending their homeland and standing up to the aggressor. The courage and resolve displayed by both soldiers and civilians alike played a crucial role in rallying the nation and setting a powerful example of resistance. The story of the Second Sino-Japanese War is truly one of bravery and perseverance.
During the years of the war, Japan started to face many problems. Their plan was not working as well as they thought it would. The Chinese leaders moved their capital to Chongqing to keep fighting. In places that Japan did not control, people were still ready to resist. They formed groups to make sure Japan did not take over completely.
Right, and in those rural areas, guerrilla tactics became a way of life. The Communist Eighth Route Army played a big role. They would hit and run, making it hard for the Japanese troops. Alongside them, the new Fourth Army also rose in importance. These armies helped keep the spirit of resistance alive in the countryside.
Exactly! Despite Japan's efforts, their control was limited. They tried hard to manage both nationalist and communist territories, but struggled. The Chinese were clever at using self-defense units. These units kept many villages safe and supported the bigger armies. They were an important part of keeping areas out of full Japanese control.
Yes, the village governments helped a lot as well. People in these areas supported the resistance because it was part of their daily lives. The Japanese plans just kept failing because of this local support and involvement. The prolonged resistance by China made it hard for Japan and changed the war's course.
The Japanese had control over many of China's key areas, and there were serious blockades during the war. These blockades made it very hard for the nationalist part of China to keep things running smoothly. The Japanese were all around, meaning supplies couldn't get in, and the economy started to suffer. The lack of resources hit hard, not only financially, but socially too. People were struggling because of high costs and fewer goods available.
Yes, that's right. Inflation became a big problem, and people started keeping too much for themselves because they were worried about not having enough. The government at the time wasn't handling these problems very well. There was a lot of corruption and bad management. People began to feel very frustrated and unhappy with how things were being run, which only made life harder during the wartime.
This situation also affected schools and universities. Because of the war and constant bombing, it was really hard for students to focus on their learning. Schools struggled with not having enough books and equipment, and a lot of students couldn't get the education they needed. Many had to deal with unhealthy conditions and the fear of attacks. In big cities, many people were forced to leave their homes, making the refugee numbers grow each day.
Absolutely, the refugee crisis was massive. Many families lost their homes and had to move to safer places, but these places were overcrowded and resources were thin. Inflation and constant price rises meant that everyday life was expensive and tough for everyone. Because of all this, public support for the government started to fall. People were losing faith in the nationalists, while the Communist Party began to seem like a much stronger option to many citizens.
And with the ongoing problems, more power did start to shift toward the communists. The atmosphere was tense, and it seemed like a civil war could break out at any time. The nationalists seemed weaker, as their support kept on dwindling. They struggled to control the entire disaster, leaving an opening for the communists to step in and start gaining more control and influence across parts of China.
True, the atmosphere was charged, with everyone feeling on edge about the future. As support shifted, the smaller skirmishes and political tensions hinted at the bigger conflict that was brewing. It was only a matter of time before things would escalate further. People were tired and wanted to see some real changes that could improve their battered lives. Clearly, the hardship combined with shifting power dynamics made everything feel very uncertain.
Let's talk about Japan's move into French Indochina. It was a strategic step, aiming to cut off China from any outside help by blocking supply routes. When the United States joined the war, it shifted the balance. Soon, Burma's supply lines were blocked, making it even harder for China to get the supplies they desperately needed. With the war in the Pacific drawing more Japanese forces, they had to stretch their resources thin. This situation provided Mao Zedong with an opportunity to strengthen the communist forces within China. They gained more ground and influence, which would have a significant impact on future events. The Japanese couldn't maintain control everywhere at once, leading to their eventual downfall.
Mao Zedong took advantage of the situation wisely. Meanwhile, the US tried to mediate between the nationalists and the communists, aiming for peace. But the distrust between the two sides was too deep. The chances of avoiding a civil war were slim. Everyone knew that once Japan was out of the picture, the internal conflict would flare up again.
The end of the Second Sino-Japanese War saw Japan finally surrender after years of exhausting conflict. The Japanese army had overextended itself, trying to hold too many territories. Their resources and morale were low, leading to a drop in effectiveness. Meanwhile, the communist forces in China, led by Mao Zedong, had gained strength and control over large areas. These liberated zones became significant in shifting the power dynamics in China.
Yes, after Japan's unconditional surrender, the US provided support for the nationalist government, hoping to see China remain stable. However, Mao Zedong's influence was growing rapidly. This changed the political scene in China drastically. As the Japanese withdrew, the contest between the communists and nationalists re-emerged. The fragile peace that was temporarily held during the war couldn't last.
Indeed, the end of the war didn't bring peace to China. Instead, it reignited long-standing disputes between the nationalists and the communists. Both sides had gained something from the conflict with Japan, be it experience, territory, or support. The U.S. tried to mediate between the two Chinese factions, but its post-war role became complicated. The nationalists, though weakened, were still considered the official government. Yet, their control was slipping.
It's true, and this clash marked the early seeds of the Cold War. As the two factions prepared for a power struggle, foreign involvement became a critical factor. The continuous struggles post-surrender showed how deeply the war's effects lingered. The country faced immense challenges, economically and socially, which affected future politics. This turmoil eventually paved the way for a new era in China, one heavily influenced by these events.
We've explored the complex journey of the Second Sino-Japanese War, highlighting the bravery and struggles faced by China. The war demonstrated the impact of unwavering resistance, which was a key factor in China's enduring fight. The involvement of foreign powers, especially the Allies, played a crucial role in turning the tide against Japanese aggression.
As we wrap up, remember the lessons learned about resistance and unity during this era. It's a call to action to reflect on past sacrifices and continue learning. Looking ahead, share your thoughts on what historical events you'd like us to dive into next. Be sure to subscribe for more insightful discussions, and don't forget, your feedback drives our future topics.